Hello everyone, Alphonse here. I'm gonna start a series talking about things that they don't teach us at school. What they don't teach us at school. And by school, I mean, I went to school in Tanzania, so maybe it's school in Africa. But then, if there's some people that went to the same schools I went to, then you probably get more. If some people that didn't, I hope it matched. No, I'm kidding. But I think we all went to the same system. So I'm just gonna talk about what they didn't teach us at school. So let's get into it. I'm gonna divide it into 3 parts, and this is part 1, and I'm gonna talk about mindset. So one of the first things they don't teach us at school, and I'm gonna start talking about mindsets towards money. Shule tumefundishwa sana kuhusu hela, lakini hujafundishwa jinsi ya kufikiria kuhusu hela. We never got taught on how to think when it comes to money. Tumefundishwa vitu vingi, lakini hawatufundishi kwa nini inabidi tufikirie vipi when it comes to money. So one of the things that we don't get taught about money is what's the purpose of money. Now by purpose means what's the real reason that people work for money. I mean, one of the things that I grew up poor, middle class almost. I think I went through those 2 stages, being poor and middle class. And one thing I learned is that when you're poor, the mindset that people have, people have when they're poor, is the real reason for money is to pay for bills. So you're like, okay, I make money and I have to pay for, let's say it's school fees, let's say it's maji, water, umeme, all these bills that you have to pay for. So the real reason I'm going to work is so I can pay these bills. And this is actually not true. And it's sad that, you pay all this money to go to school, and then they don't even teach you what you should think about money. Or not even how you should think when it comes to money. Another thing that, when it comes to money, another mindset that people have is that money, the reason for money is for you to have, this is something I've seen common in America, because I don't think, in Tanzania we didn't have a system for credit, but in America is, middle class think the real reason for money is so you can have good credit, and then when you have good credit you can buy things you can't afford, and then stay on those things that you can't afford, and just keep on going up with that lifestyle. Now, me saying this, I'm not saying I've never been there. Since I went in the poor age where I was just thinking, okay, I'm making money so I can pay for this. But then later, you get to middle class and you have good credit and you're making a little bit more money, but then you're buying things that you can't afford to just satisfy this thing, and then just show people that maybe you're making more money or whatever. And then you just stay in the same cycle. But what I came to learn later was that the real purpose of money is to make more. It's to invest and learn and make more. When you look at people who are rich and successful, when it comes to money, the way they think about money is thinking that money is there for them to invest it and see how much they can make babies with it. We talk about the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. We talk about, when you look at rich people, they're not talking about trying to be rich. It's almost like a game. So this is what, they should have taught us in school. If I was taught this in school earlier, I would have probably been doing what I needed to do then and becoming who I need to become then, so that I can get better. I can be in a better place when I grow up. Now sadly, they don't teach us, and I'm doing this and sharing this now because they still don't teach us that, and it's sad. So second thing is that they don't teach us that money is a good idea. And this is something I got from Myron Golden, but he always talks about money is a good idea because money is a God idea. What does that mean? When you look at the book of Genesis, I don't remember the chapter. Genesis, somewhere there, God mentions gold in the Garden of Eden. And if you think about it, if you have gold in a Garden of Eden, but then there's only 2 people, there's no shops, and that's one of the purest form of wealth to this day, why would God put gold in a garden that there's only 2 people, there's no stores? Because God believes, God wants us to be rich. God wants us to have money. If God didn't want us to have money, he wouldn't have done that. You go a little bit further ahead on Genesis. I think this is chapter 12 actually. Talks about Abram, who later became Abraham. Abram was a man, when God started talking to him and taking care of him, it says Abram was very rich in cattle and silver and gold. It didn't say that he was only rich, it just said he was very rich, and he said he was rich in cattle and silver and gold. Why? Because God wants his people to have money. Now, this is one thing that I really didn't like as a kid. I was a pastor's kid. I was going to church every time. But one I didn't like is that every time I go to church, nitaona tunakuja kanisani and then praying for money and tutakesha. Nafanya mikesha. Nimekaa kwenye mikesha kibao. Nafanya kwenye mikesha kibao, and the next thing you know is that when it comes to money, it's like they'll pray for money, but then it's like it just didn't make sense. I just didn't like it. It's almost like people were telling, without saying it. It was almost like saying that, oh, if you had money, then you're doing some devil stuff. And this is another thing too. That's a game that people do back home. I remember mtu yote akiwa tajiri ghafla, Freemason. If someone just gets famous or it starts making money, people start saying he made a deal with the devil. Like, where does that come from? And we keep on saying that, but then the thing that's happening is that it keeps on just getting into our brain. So then later, we struggle to make money because you're thinking, I have to make a deal. And then you're also thinking maybe people might think of you bad. So even when you have an opportunity to make more money, or someone gives you an opportunity to make a lot of money, you're already resisting because you have all these things that you had as a kid telling you that, oh yeah, for me to make money, I have to do something bad. And that's not true. So this is one of the things I didn't even, like, I wish if I went to school and I'm paying for school fees and my teacher's in class and he's teaching me this, because these are things that would actually help me. But me nienda darasani nafundishwa la somo ambalo mwalimu mwenyewe hazi-apply. Mimi mwenyewe sizi-apply. So I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm still happy that I learned some of the things that we learned, like, kuandika and kusoma and all that. But then when it comes to like other things that were really important, they didn't really touch on that. Why? Anyways, moving on to the next point. Making money is actually simple mathematics. So for some reason, we go and learn multiplying, addition, subtraction, and we go in and start learning like calculus. I mean, they call it calculus in America, but back home, quadratic and functions and range. And unajifunza vitu vyote hivi, lakini ukija kuelewa hela, it's really just pure math. What do I mean by pure math? If you want to make more money, you just literally just have to know the basic math. So example, when you want to make $10,000 a month. So making $10,000 a month just means either you have a job that pays you $100 an hour and you work for what? That's 100 hours a month. That's one way. Another way is for you to learn a skill that can involve you selling something for, let's say, whatever amount, then you multiply that to get to 10,000. It's really simple. Like, making money is really simple. Just like, okay, I want to make $1,000 a month, $1,000 a week. All I need is to sell $100 worth of things, $100 worth of things. If it's not selling, if it's just working, you work a job, you want to make $10,000 a week, then okay, this job needs to pay me $1,000 an hour, and then for $1,000 an hour, I need to do this. Now, is that possible? So you just work on that. It's really that simple. And we go and learn other things, but we never touch on this. Anyways, next is mindset towards health. And I'm talking about mindset because this is the first thing that you always have to look at. If you want to change anything in your life, it always has to start with the mindset, because the reason why is because if you don't like the output, and the output meaning the result, if you don't like what's coming outside, you have to look at what's going inside to create what's coming outside. So how do you do that? It starts with the mindset. Kama upendi unachoona, like, what are you doing to create that? So let's say you're looking for a job, and everywhere you go, they tell you no. Now, instead of looking outside, because that's what most people do. I've heard this so many times. oh, watu watakumpa kazi kwa sababu mimi nini. People don't want to give me. That's not. Instead of thinking that, think, how can I get a yes from a job? How can I? If you think about how, your brain will start, like your mind will start figuring out ways. And then and this is why it talks when I talk about mindset, because you have to start with in here. Once you start in here, everything else will follow. So yeah, mindset on health. For some reason, I remember going to school and tunafundishwa balanced diet. You go to science, but then everything the teacher talks in English, we just cram. We never understand it, and we just go and learn and go back home and just go on with our day. But then this could be a mistake in people the way they taught it, or this could be a mistake of the whole system in general. But the point is, we don't learn what's the real purpose of health, and by health meanings like well-being, feeling good, getting some good rest, getting some exercise, eating well. We don't really learn the real purpose. The real purpose of health is longevity. We're here in this world to live, but then at the end of the day, kama afya yako sio nzuri, utaishi miaka mingi. Sasa tufundishwe shule. Tunaenda shule, tunakula chakula, tunajua chakula kimewekwa mboga nini, lakini haongelei the importance. Na hata, because there's ways to teach these things. And we can get on that later, but at the same time, which is just, the problem is tufundishwe. So one of the things nakumbuka hata mboga ilikuwa kama vile, and the crazy thing is in Tanzania, greens are actually way cheaper than junk food. Like, you come to America, you see. In America, it's like almost the opposite, where eating healthy is actually more expensive than eating, junk. You can get dollar meals out here. But anyways, so we don't learn like, okay, we need to focus on our longevity and on our bodies and making sure our bodies are feeling good and we're, exercising and sleeping well. They just touch on it, but it's not as emphasized as much. And then when you grow up and then you're older and then you wish somebody had, you wish you had took it serious when you were younger. That's what most people say. Oh yeah, I wish I took it serious when I was younger. But then the thing is, it's really because at that time you're prioritizing something else. And when you're prioritizing something else, and that something wasn't really beneficial, at least to your health, then what happens? Anyway, so yeah, and one of the things that is the biggest one was like how the words we use encourage, how the words we use towards food, actually were hurting us. Like back home, mtu akona kitambi. If you have a big stomach, then in Tanzania and in Africa, I think too, people just say, oh, you got money. Like, it's money stomach. Like, what does that mean? Like, so people think like, yeah, me having me looking chubby just means I have more money because I can afford to eat more. I guess. But then really what people do when you say that is almost encouraging that behavior. And when you encourage a behavior, it becomes a habit. And when it becomes a habit, then it's almost unconscious. You just keep on doing it. The next thing you know, anyways. So yeah, it's crazy how it works. It's just that we always just, when it comes to food, and then this is another thing. If you look at the Bible is very nice, because if you look at the Bible and the words it uses, it's very specific. Like when you go to the Bible and you look at what God says about food and, sin, God uses words that are very, like if you look at the Ten Commandments, don't commit adultery, don't commit murder. Those words just don't sound good. But what happens is because of our society, we change the wording and use like words that are less, So when someone says like, so at least like, when it comes to food, people can just say, oh man, I'm a foodie, I mean, mimi napenda msosi, mimi mtu msosian. But then you look at the Bible, it says gluttony is actually not good. So if you look at the word that it uses, even when it just sounds like I don't want to do it. But then when you look at how people say it in the society, in the environment that we're around, we just make it sound like it's good. When you make it sound like it's good, it doesn't sound that bad to do. And then you encourage it. So, but then there's actually one thing that I actually remember that, I might get some heat from this, but it's something I kind of agree on a little bit. Back home when we were younger, if someone is a little bit chubbier than the other ones, they'll call them names, they'll bully them. But it was almost like a way of putting a standard of like, okay, we got to be better than this. And of course, now we're in a society where we're a little bit more softer, so you can't really bully people. But to some degree, I think bullying was a good thing. I know kiitwa bonge, kiitwa nini, then some kids it worked. It helped them get better. But of course, maybe some kids it didn't. But this is something I just wanted to point out. But of course, when you grow up, that doesn't happen anymore because nobody can tell you nothing. So last one, mindset towards relationships. For some reason, this is something actually that impacted me a lot. And by relationships, I mean, I'm not talking about, I don't even want to get into like romantic ones. I'm just talking about relationships between people, your father, you and your mother, you and your friends, you and your colleagues, you and your classmates. The mindsets that people, they don't get teachers. Like, we go to school, we have a lot of friends, and then you leave school, then suddenly you don't have any friends. Or you lost touch. And then later, if you call them for something, people start thinking maybe you need something or you want money or why? Why is that? Because in school, we're not taught that, hey, this bond right here that you're making in class with everyone that you're meeting, this could be something. So make sure you should also make sure to have the mindset of making sure you nurture it and water it. And how do you do that? Is by being intentional with your relationships that you create at school. You never know who you met in class. You have people that sometimes when they grow up, like, man, I went to the same class with this person. And that person maybe that time is the president. But then now because things got out of touch or whatever thing, maybe that person could have helped you with the way he is right now. But then because of all the things that happened, then you can't even do it. But then if you were intentional, if we were taught to think of relationships as something that is really valuable, because really, if you think about in life, it's really who you know, what you know. Like one of the biggest things people talk about when they grow up later is networking is important. But then would networking be easier if you kept relationships with all the people that you met through your younger ages? Because this is one good thing about people that you knew when you were still in school, is that you knew them or you knew each other when you guys had nothing. So then if you keep on that relationship, it won't be like seeming like you want something from them because you guys know each other before you even had anything to offer to each other. So even later, if something comes up and they can help you, it's really just you giving and receiving. Like it's a good relationship rather than waiting and letting it go and then calling them when you need help, or waiting till someone passes away to show up in a funeral, or going to the high school reunions and trying to find out what people are doing, or being afraid to even go to reunions because of where you end up going to in life. Purpose of, I touched on the purpose of relationships. And this is another key point that I actually learned from one of my brother's friends. He was reading this book. I can't remember the name, but it talks about how relationships really work. And he was reading this book that broke it down into two things. He talked about high tides and low tides. So you know how in the beach, you have the water, and then you have sometimes high tides, and sometimes you might have low tides. Now what happens is, relationships is almost the same way. You have your high tides, and your high tides could be your mom, your dad, teens, people that if something happened to them, your world would really change. Meaning that, the way you are right now with that relationship that you're with those people is that you are almost in direct contact with anything that happens to them. And you don't want anything to happen to them, of course, this is an example. Now, when you talk about low tides, are people just, you meet on the street, you have a conversation. A person, your barber, you probably go to the barber every time. Your boss at work, your colleagues at work, your people that you met in class, your professor in class. These are low tides. But one of the things that's really fascinating about relationships, that you never know that those low tides could actually make big changes in your life. And this is so an example. Like, I remember to this day the how I got to a career I'm in now. I was working in a farmer's market, and we had this customer, a Jewish guy, comes in every weekend. Never knew his name, always funny. Came maybe like for a month. I just seen him, and I always have a laugh. I never knew what he was doing. And then one day I asked him. I asked his wife actually. I said, "Your husband is very funny. Is he always like that?" And she told me, "No, he's a funeral director, so I was like, "What?" I wanted to get in that industry. So she went and introduced me to her husband. He liked me and brought me over to his funeral home. He had 3. I went to a couple other ones. Then from there he was like, "I want, whatever you need, let me know." And then next thing you know, of course, he told me if I was Jewish, he'd give me a job. But then, not sadly, but I'm not Jewish. So anyways, what ended up happening was he connected me to someone else that helped me, one of his colleagues who is really good and also helped me get where I am now. And this is how like low tides can really be high tides. So what does that mean? That means whatever connection, whatever relationship you create, you want to be intentional with it. And they don't teach us that. I wish someone did, because I would have done that long time ago. I would have started doing that long time ago. And I have so many examples of low tides doing big things. I just never thought it that way. So I hope you got a lot of things today, and I'll see you on the next one.